So just for posterity, before I send this to the MSF of Singapore, who do the child protection services. So this is to Child Protection Services of Singapore. I've sent them over the past 7 years, so many. It's their job. They're legally bound under the UN treaty to respond to these kinds of reports, and they just ignore it. After witnessing years of disinterest in children by the Singaporean MSF, it's a ministry, right? I would like to try again to get a response, because I've tried many times, and inquire how the MSF can help a father of a 13-year-old Singaporean national who was a victim of international parental child abduction in 2014 and is now for the second time missing again. It appears he has had his name changed, along with the abducting parents, and have been evading the father now for 4 years, both of them. This is a second abduction through retention, after the first being a cross-border abduction, neither of which the MSF has addressed yet. My son is missing and being parentally alienated and brainwashed to not want to see his father, and he doesn't know why. He's been brainwashed since he's 5 and he's 13 now. And he's had 4 years, 3.5, 4 years nearly without seeing me to be brainwashed further. And the mother registered the name changes into Chinese writing and new names to make it really difficult for me to trace them. And this suggests the intent to forever estrange the child from his father. Yeah. Is the MSF not prepared to protect my Singaporean child from such psychological abuse? I've been fighting to protect my son since 2014, and Singapore has done nothing to assist. In fact, Singapore child welfare has covered it up. They have. It's because they have to give a yearly report to the UN on international parental child abduction and on the rights of the child, because they broke Article 10, not allowing him to travel to see his father in Thailand. Article 10 of the rights of the child says any child who has parents living in 2 countries is allowed to leave and enter his own country for purposes of family reunion with the other parent in that parent's country. And they deny him that by court order, which conflicts with Article 10 of the World Convention on the Rights of the Child, which Singapore is a signatory party to and must obey. And if there's a case, they have to report it to the UN in a compulsory annual report, both on the rights of the child and on the civil aspects of international parental child abduction, as written out in the Hague Convention on the civil aspects of international parental child abduction, to which Singapore and Thailand, where my son was abducted from, are signatory nations. However, being a signatory nation, both of them, doesn't mean that they send the children back when one is kidnapped, or abducted, as they say, because a parent can't, open quote, quote, kidnap, close quote, quote, their own child. You can abduct them, but you can't kidnap. For me, it's the same thing. Abduction and kidnap is the same thing. So they're covering it up because they don't want to put it in their yearly report and lower their GDP. So they'd rather let my son remain brainwashed, kidnapped, mentally abused, and he's even been physically assaulted in Singapore by his grandfather, who pulled his teeth out with a pair of pliers, which could have caused an infection, got into the brain, and his brain could have swelled and died. Yeah, hygiene like that. I'm an ex-tattooist and piercer, and I learnt from a microsurgeon, and I can tell you he could have killed my son through a infection, yeah, and getting to the brain like that, through his teeth into his skull with a dirty pair of pliers. And I reported that to this MSF as well in the past, and to the police, and filed it in courts as a case of abuse, of a case of assault on my son. And they said, oh, you're allowed to cause bleeding on a child. And teachers are allowed to hit your children in Singapore, but if a parent hits the child, they go to prison. But this non-parent, non-legal guardian pulls my child's teeth out, causing fear of hurt, which apparently you're allowed to do to a child. But I was charged with a protection order for causing fear of hurt in Singapore, which I hadn't done. But it was just used as a legal mechanism, a maneuver to stop me seeing my son, which the mother tried everything. She tries everything, and she's succeeded for 7-8 years now. So I tell them, yeah, now can you do your jobs, please? I say, here, I've been fighting to protect my son. Singapore's done nothing to assist. In fact, they've covered it up, as I just explained. So I say now, can you do your jobs, please, for once, and respond to me for once in a decade, and help me to stop my son from being further mentally abused by a truly pathologically ill mother who is psychopathic? Can you help? You're supposed to act to prevent children from these things. So why are you failing? Sorry, just correct that. Why are you failing in your duty since 2014, sitting on your laurels doing nothing when I attempt to report this wrongdoing to a child? This email is recorded as evidence of being sent. Hello, everybody. And uploaded as video screencast and shared to YouTube, FB, not FVB, FB, and just edit that, sorry. And later will appear on humanrightssingapore.com, which I bought in anger. That's my domain, and I bought that in anger at the Singaporean government for completely ignoring the plight of my son. Never mind ignoring my sufferings as a father, as a left-behind parent, in the shock with PTSD and sadness and depression from living with the daily knowledge of the kidnap of my son, and I haven't seen him for 4 years, and he's had his name changed. I'm not asking for them to solve my problems of stress, of the wrongdoing, because I've been done wrong as well. I'm asking them to focus on the rights of the child, which are of paramount importance above those of any parent or adult, or the politics of Singapore and the GDP, which is why they're covering up my son's abduction, and they're ignoring the fact he's now gone missing, had his name changed without my consent or knowledge, and they don't give a toss. So this is why this is going on YouTube, so I can show that I sent this email and that they do not respond. Yeah, so the whole world can see. And if they respond, I'll upload that to YouTube, or I will post it to Facebook. I got a response. But if I don't get a response from the MSF, then at least I can expose them to the world, because if they're not helping me see my son and I don't get to see my son, and my son gets abused like this and brainwashed and grows up thinking his father isn't looking for him or doesn't care, which is a lie, and he's being taught to think that, then I'm going to expose the MSF for the child abusing, politically motivated, agenda focused, human rights abuse pile of rubbish it is, because I've been asking them to help in physical abuse on my son, mental abuse, the kidnap, and they don't give a toss. Yeah, they don't care, because I'm a foreigner, foreign father. So as of now, I am documenting, and I'm going to document every single one. So when they don't respond, I'm going to write another one and upload it to YouTube and Facebook and to humanrightssingapore.com as a blog post with the YouTube video inserted, yeah, and a contundently written article explaining their wrongdoing. Or maybe they're going to pull their socks up, or maybe react to avoid this going public on YouTube too much, to the point where international news agencies get interested, which is why I'm doing this. Because the only way I can think to force Singaporean authorities to react and help my son, not me, my son, the child. Stop thinking I'm trying to ask for help, because every time I do, they keep talking about, yes, we understand your needs and rights as a parent. I said, piss off, you don't know what I'm fighting for. I'm not fighting for my rights. I'm fighting for the rights of the child. And every time I said that, they'll look away, because they know the rights of the child is superior to the rights of the mother or the father. And they refuse to admit it, because if they do look at the rights of the child, I filed a Guardianship of Infants Act case to protect him. And that can't be deleted without my signed notice of discontinuance. Or I delete it myself. I say I don't want to run this case. A judge in Singapore deleted it. FC/OSG139/2015. That's the name of the case. If you want to look it up, you won't find it in the database because a Singaporean judge illegally deleted it. Even though I said I'm running that case in person, acting in person, which is acknowledged by the Singaporean government and courts. I've already got the letter stamped acknowledging me as acting as my own lawyer in person, and I do not give you permission to delete that, and I refuse, and in fact I say I demand to run that case, and I'm still waiting for a hearing date. Now give me a hearing date. And he just wrote something with his pen and closed the hearing, and the next thing I heard was they deleted the case. And I tried to accuse him for deleting the case. I wrote to the Singaporean courts, the Supreme Court, and they sent me a 7-page PDF after a 3-week investigation saying they found no wrongdoing. I said, well, how can you find no wrongdoing? The judge deleted it without my signature. You can't delete it without my signature. Show me my signature where I signed permission. And they just refused to respond to any further emails because they can't show me the signed permission, which means they deleted it illegally and they refused to admit it. And the UN, I reported that to the United Nations and to my government. They don't want to help. They're making too much money banking and doing international trade with each other to care about whether a little boy is being abused or not. Yeah? They'd rather just overlook it, pretend it isn't happening. So I'm documenting it, yeah? To show Singapore's atrocious treatment of the case of my son's abduction, parental alienation and brainwashing, and how in the past the MSF ignored a case of physical assault causing fear of hurt to my child by a non-legal guardian without consent or knowledge of either parent, preferring to let the child suffer above losing face politically, or perhaps refusing to help because the father is foreign and the abuser of the child is a Singaporean. That's also true. That's also something to do with it. Favouring your own. Singapore favours its own, of course. Most countries do. And let the child be abused to evade handing the child back to me, which is why they do allow him to be abused. Because if they truly address the issue, they would see he's been wrongly abducted and he should be sent back, just as they said they would when they signed the Hague Convention. The intention was to return all children that had been taken across a border from any Hague country to another Hague Convention signatory country. They have to go back to the country they were taken from because they were taken without knowledge or consent of the other parent. If one parent takes a child to another country and runs away without knowledge or consent of the other parent, that breaks the Hague Convention. And any 2 member states, countries, who signed that convention are supposed to send the child back within 3 weeks of being reported missing. Which I did report, but they didn't send the child back. Because Thailand and Singapore, Thailand became a member in 2006, Singapore became a member in 2010. And as soon as you become a member, if any other country, neighbouring country becomes a member after, you're supposed to approach the latter accession country, which is Singapore in this case. So Thailand should have approached Singapore in 2010 to say, let us sign a bilateral agreement to return all kidnapped and abducted children. Thing is, they didn't because they don't want to. So why did they sign the Hague Convention in the first place? Well, obviously not to stop child kidnapping and abduction, rather so they could continue trading within the UN without any sanctions, because if they refuse to sign it, then they don't get the same trade rights as other nations who do sign it. So they sign the first treaty of the Hague, but they still don't have to return children unless they sign a bilateral treaty with every other country that ever signed the Hague to return abducted children. So it's a clever thing, really. You just sign, become a Hague member, don't get sanctioned, get special benefits, get some money from the UN so you can open a Hague Convention Shelter Authority office in your country, which they don't. They just find an empty room in case anybody does report a child abduction. And so they don't have any extra expenses, but they do get extra money from the United Nations for becoming a Hague member, because then they need money from the UN to open a Hague office. But they don't open an office. In Thailand neither. When I went to report it, they had to find 2 chairs and an empty room, and they couldn't even fill out the report for me because they didn't have a copy. And they didn't have a printer to print some copies out. And they didn't have a copy. So, and that was 2014. So from 2016 to 2014, they became members, but they didn't yet print out a single complaint form in Thai or translate it. So they just sign to make money and stay in the UN. But they do not do what the treaty is supposed to do, which is prevent kids from being abducted from their parents. So let's see what the MSF is going to do after this email, because they're trying to avoid handing the child back, which is what they'd have to do if they really admitted the wrongdoing of the mother in this case. Yeah, she's not the only person with wrongdoing. We had wrongdoings in the marriage. I had my own wrongdoings. They were bad enough, but that's a wrongdoing in marriage. That's nothing to say. That's a relationship that doesn't work. That has nothing to say. That means that my son has to lose his rights to communicate with his own father. And that is not the right of the Singaporean government to say this child should not be allowed to communicate with his own father for no other reason that we don't want to be embarrassed in the United Nations, and we don't want the world to know that we are biased and that we cover up child abductions, because Singapore is covering up a child abduction deliberately and knowingly. They know what's happening to my son since 2014, and they're just so passively looking on, and they don't care. And we're talking about child protection services here, who I'm writing to. They don't care. Yeah? They're ignoring the plight of the child to protect political interests. So I'm challenging them now. I challenge you publicly with this casted email going to YouTube to prove me otherwise by responding to this report of my son's second abduction disappearance. So I challenge you now to respond. And YouTube people, Facebook people, Ajahn Spencer subscribers, and anybody who knows of my son's plight, and indeed my own, because I've got feelings as well, and I've got rights as well, as a father and as a human being, and as somebody who loves his son and who wants to see his son, and who have got much more money than his mother and much more ability to help my son with many things, educatively. He's a boy, I'm a man. A mother cannot give everything. And he's getting to the age now where he needs a father, and she won't be able to control him. It's time now. He needs to see his dad. So MSF, I challenge you now. And I'm not sending this email until I'm going to draft it now, upload this video, and include the link to this YouTube/Facebook/humanrightssingapore.com blog post video exposing this issue and begging the Singaporean MSF Child Protection Services to pull their fingers out of their proverbial anus. Excuse the impoliteness, but 7 years of being ignored and watching you ignore my son's suffering is enough, In my opinion, to be quite honest, you should hang your heads in shame when you walk in the UN, And you're not that much different from the Nazi POW camp makers, And really find that your attitude is a total human rights abuse country, and your forced military service and your death sentence and stuff, and forcing children to sing the national anthem, You should look at the movie on Netflix, America's Most Hated Woman, She was an atheist, and she kicked up a fuss that the schools were forcing her child to say the Lord's Prayer because you have to be Christian, forcing religion on people. It's like you forcing the national anthem on my child when he's half British. What if there's a disagreement between Britain and Singapore? You don't want to teach him Singapore nationalism because he's not just Singaporean. He has a British heritage. And right now he's being conditioned with solely, purely Chinese language, Chinese culture, and being prevented from any contact with anything English at all because he's got an English father and his mother doesn't want my son, Angelo, too, who's probably not called Angelo anymore. Well, she'll say she changed his name to protect him because I'm talking about him on the internet. I'm talking about him on the internet to protect him because she is abusing him. So, yeah, that's a crap excuse from her. Yeah, she's not doing it for that reason. It might sound like a real reason, but it's not. She's doing it because she wants to keep him all to herself because she's sick in the head, like that Agatha Christie novel of the woman who takes a famous writer she idolizes, who had a car crash near her house, and he puts him in the bed. She puts him in her house in the bedroom, but she breaks his legs when he's out and told him it was in the crash. And it's because she wants to keep him as her own possession in her room forever, like a prisoner. And that's what my ex-wife wants to do with my son. She thinks, I bet they're still sleeping in the same bed, and he's 14 soon. I know when he was 10, yeah, he still didn't have his own room. She was still sleeping him in her bed. And I told her, 5, I told the courts, it's time for him to have his own bedroom. And she lied, saying they made a room for him, but they didn't. Still sleeping in her bed. So, MSF, yeah, there's a 14-year-old male boy sleeping in his mother's bed, yeah, without his own bedroom. And you allowed that because I could give him his own bedroom because I earn 10 times more than she does, yeah. And her assets were like $700 less than she needed every month just to break even. And I showed you my assets, which were 10 times more, and you didn't recognize my assets in court simply because there was no tax returns, because I'm not taxable. Yeah? I'm a digital nomad. I don't pay tax. It doesn't mean I don't earn money. And I went to Singapore 4 times a year, plus to courts, plus lost about $200,000 over 7 years in lawyers. How the hell would I be without assets and money? They can't recognize I have any money. If I could afford to go to Singapore and stay in hotels and fly there and back and pay lawyers and take my son out and buy him presents. But they don't recognize my assets. And she had minus $700 every month, but they still saw fit that she can afford to look after and school my son adequately. Well, you can see obviously total judicial bias and refusal to actually admit the truth that I am the more eligible main custodian. Secondly, because I'm not a psychopath and I don't have that unhealthy kind of attachment that wants to possess a person and not let them have any affection or contact with any other relatives except oneself. Me and you against the world. And that's her attitude. But it's my son's life, not hers. And he is a person, not an object. So MSF, respond to this or remain embarrassed, and I'll keep sharing this around the internet and start a change.org campaign again, which the last time the Singaporean courts threatened me I wouldn't be able to see my son unless I deleted it. When I was already getting about 1,000 signatures, and it'd only been up for a week or so. But anyway, I can do it again, Singapore and MSF. So, child services, get your fingers out of your proverbial anus and start protecting my son, and find a way for my son that he can contact and speak with his father, at least on phone and on FaceTime or something, because you're doing nothing and you know about this problem. I've reported it to you enough times. There's enough judges, there's enough child welfare service people, there's enough counsellors know about this, yeah? And you all know, and you're ignoring it. The Ministry of Education knows about this, yeah? His school knows he's being educated without my signature and that was forged. The Ministry of Education didn't take the action they say they do, that if somebody forges a document to get a child into a primary school without the consent of the other parent, that is prosecuted as a criminal act. No, nobody prosecuted her. She committed 2 cybercrime acts against me to steal data, use stolen data and fake it and forge it to use as fake evidence, so forged evidence and stolen data, breaking the Cybercrime Act, to present that as evidence in court against me. Such under-the-belt behaviour. And every maneuver she's done, she's used legal mechanisms and legal maneuvers that any judge with a brain bigger than the size of a pea would see that is a crazy, vengeful, scorned ex-wife trying to punish the ex-husband but using the child as a weapon, disregarding the rights, happiness, and life of the child, and the mental welfare of the child, and the social welfare of the child, just to get back at the father. And courts have been allowing, many countries, most countries, have been allowing women to do this to men in divorce and custody cases ever since divorce and custody existed. And so, I think it's about time that the justice system started looking at the rights of fathers, because now there are male mums who stay at home and women who go to work. It's not true anymore that you should always give the kid to the woman, especially if she's an ex-drug addict who'd only been out of prison a few years after a 6-year sentence for addiction to meth. Yeah? Who uses a video stolen from my brother's phone of me talking to my brother, and I wipe my mouth and she says I'm licking a cigarette and smoking marijuana. And I show a prescription for medical marijuana from a doctor in Thailand to the courts and say, well, that's just like saying I take aspirin because it's just my medicine from the doctor, because actually I do have medical marijuana and I have a prescription. And the courts then decide that a woman who's been in prison for 6 years for amphetamines, Class A drugs, should be more fitting to look after her child, than the father who legally smokes medical marijuana, who has been prescribed it from a doctor for his physical illness, right? So I take legal medication and they see it not fit for the child to see me because I take legal medication, so I take aspirin. But aspirin's illegal in Singapore, or they look at it as something bad. Aspirin's legal and it's a medication. But in Thailand, marijuana is legal, cannabis is legal, and it's a medication. And so, a legal doctor's medication. Singapore wants to stop a child from seeing his father because he receives legal medication from a doctor for a true illness. But they think it's okay for him to stay with a woman who took amphetamines and went to prison for it for 6 years, yeah, and nearly got thrown out of the house by her husband, me, many times for neglecting the child and forgetting to feed him, because, yes, I take medical marijuana as a medicine, and she was jealous when she lived in Thailand, when we were together with my child and still not divorced, before she kidnapped him, yeah? But she was also jealous that I had marijuana. Because apart from it being a medicine, yes, it does put you in a good mood. It makes you feel good. And so she would always say, I need something as well. And she would go out and get herself amphetamines. Which means after coming out from prison in Singapore, a country that takes such things really seriously, whilst being a mother with a child, she neglected the child, going out taking amphetamines, which I forbade her, but she ignored. And we had fights on sometimes, which she used in court saying family violence, because fights mean she hit me, I hit her back, I hit her, she hit me back, we're rolling on the floor. But 2 ways, not 1 way. Not a man hitting a woman, not men hit women, no. She's bigger than me, I've got bad health. Actually, she was on top of me and I was out of breath and I couldn't move, to be honest. So she's much stronger than me, actually. Yeah, so don't think a woman can't beat up a man. And she broke my rib as well. But no excuses for that. People fighting, families fighting, it's not good on either side. So I don't make any excuses for that. My own behavior was not good either. But not a meth addict. And those fights were about, you have not done your duty with our child, you're neglecting the child, I don't want some junky mother, yeah? So if you want to take something, have a glass of wine before bed, yeah? Or smoke weed. I don't like weed, okay? But don't take any hard drugs. You're a mother now. We've had our fun when we were young, yeah? We've had our years of fun. It's now time for us to dedicate this to our child. So MSF, yeah? You start thinking like I do and care about children instead of don't care, because you're an institution for child welfare and child protection services, and you're not protecting children. So let's see you do your jobs. And if not, let's let the world on YouTube see that you don't do your job. And I'll keep sending you emails about this. So, Ajahn Spencer, trying again to see his son after 7 years, trying, with a very stubborn Singaporean government covering up his abduction, signing off.